I was locked in a hotel and we had to be taught how to dress, how to speak, what to put on our slides, and so on. And I enjoyed it at the beginning. I thought, this is really cool. This is such a great system, and quickly rebelled against it.
Welcome to Bloom. This is a podcast that explores stories of leadership and success from highly sensitive people who have overcome adversities and are now using their gifts to empower their communities. Here's your host, Berlage-Buccellati.
Welcome to Bloom, the place for highly sensitive change makers to be inspired, to step into their power and be the missing link that they are waiting for. I'm very excited to finally launch this podcast. On this very first episode, my co-host is the wonderful and, of course, highly sensitive Sarah Boxx. Sarah is a distinguished founder of Sarah Boxx Coaching and Consulting and the Sandbox Productions, with over 35 years of experience in both nonprofit and entrepreneurial spheres. She has received numerous awards for her contributions to government service and is dedicated to positioning nonprofits at the forefront of transformative discussions and solution creation. As an accomplished executive director, victim advocate, board member, and leadership development trainer, Sarah continues to inspire positive change and innovation, and I can vouch for it. Hi, Sarah. So happy to have your support on this first episode.
I've been looking forward to supporting you and this particular interview, so I'm glad to be here.
So happy, I can tell you. So let's welcome Guillaume. Today we have a conversation with my friend and mentor, Guillaume Wiatr. He encouraged and supported me on my path to build a business around highly sensitive change leaders, and still continues to do so. And I am absolutely ravished that he is the first one on my first episode. So let me tell you a little bit about Guillaume. Guillaume is, of course, a highly sensitive person and is the founder of MetaHelm, a company whose motto is guiding the guides. And I'm sure he will have interesting things to say about his motto. Guillaume supports and guides CEOs, founders, leadership teams, and solopreneurs like me to gain focus, traction, and build an authentic and successful business that potentially makes the world a better place. So he is indeed a highly sensitive person with a mission. And he does so with much expertise, creativity, and humor. On the business side, he's sought after by senior executives of companies like Alaska Airlines, the Gates Foundation, Generations for Peace, L'Oreal, Spencer Stuart, JP, Google, Microsoft. Do I need to add any more? Yes, I guess the US and the French governments. Guillaume teaches and mentors entrepreneurs at startup incubators, EM Lyon International Business School, and the University of Washington, ranked number 3 in the US. So welcome, Guillaume.
Yole and Sarah. There we are. Thank you so much for having me today. This is a very special moment for me to have you, both here. And I'm excited to be here today.
So let's dive in. When I read this sentence on your homepage, where you define narrative power, as narrative power is really your baby, you define it as the leadership ability to defy the normal when the normal is wrong. And I was really intrigued by that because there is a lot in that sentence. Please explain to us why you chose that statement. Why is that so foundational and important to you?
Well, that statement is the culmination of a lot of experiences and work and trial and errors, and looking to put words on something that is very intangible to me, something that I've always felt that was around me and in the work that I do and in everything that is, everything that seems to pull me in the general direction of life. It's a fairly recent definition, in fact. And it's a definition that has evolved over the years. And I'd like to start there because that's by definition itself, this definition is about change. Do you see what I mean?
Yes,
It has been changing over time, has been evolving over time. And so it really crystallizes and illustrates really well the way I see progress and growth in life and business in general. I see life and business in general as a continual prototyping exercise, as an experiment, right? So always a source of learning, always a source of discovery, and a place and an experience that always gives you a chance to do it again, right? So there is failure, there are problems, there are things we run into, but we can experience these problems and these failures if we go at them with this mindset of a curiosity and experimentation. So that definition is the output of this mindset and this work. And I've been trying to put words on what I have felt that in my life I was up against many times as an entrepreneur. And as I also noticed, many of my clients and colleagues and peers and friends be up against. And it's almost that, we have all these dreams and these wishes, these aspirations. And then we engage in the journey that takes us there. And along the path, we feel like things are not going just as smoothly or as fast or as easily as we wanted to go. Whether that change or that journey is internal as an entrepreneur or external, we're trying to impact a community, like Sarah is trying to completely transform the way nonprofits are considered and perceived in the communities with stakeholders. So it could be both aspects. But I always notice that at some point we have to defy, and that's when this word came. We have to push against. We have to recognize that we can say no to certain things, but it's up to us to say that, to recognize and say it. And so we have to defy what is typically accepted as normal everywhere. What is the common wisdom? But a common wisdom that, at some point we have to recognize that is not working anymore. So maybe that normal is something about us or something about the outside. So for me, the normal, there's been so many things I've been defying and I continue to defy. It's an ongoing and daily process. But for me, especially in business, it started in my early career and early years with how do I integrate creativity in a business industry that is fairly traditional. I mean, consulting. And I started in the mid to late 90s, and now consulting is these days, we're in 2023 and 2023, sorry, consulting has changed a lot. But at the time it was still a fairly, if you look at the history of consulting, like really consulting as we know it today dates from the post World War II era, of trying to improve the way organizations and companies work. So at the time in the 90s, there was not so many trails that had already been designed. You could go work for a big firm or a boutique firm, but that's about it, right? It was like, very, very regimented, not regulated, but regimented. There was a lot of code and science. So I joined a strategy consulting firms in 1998, and the first thing I had to do was to go to literally a boot camp. We hear the word boot camp because it sounds cool, but this was an actual boot camp. For 1 or 2 weeks, I was locked in a hotel, and we had to be taught how to dress, how to speak, what to put on our slides, and so on. And I enjoyed it at the beginning. I thought, this is really cool. This is such a great system, and quickly rebelled against it because I thought it doesn't match with how I see things. And so for me, the normal was that I was up against was, okay, how do I bring in the creative side of me in this work of consulting? There's got to be a different way. But I couldn't find anybody to show me this path. Keep in mind, I was in France also, where consulting and coaching at that time was a very, very immature field, unlike the United States. I moved in the United States in 2008, so about 10 years later. And so that's where these definitions come from my appetite to find a better way to drive change within me and outside.
Well, I just wanted to say in a way that, you already gave us a lot of nuggets for aspiring, highly sensitive leaders or change leaders. And to really point out again that these aspects of not being comfortable if something is normal but wrong, that is such an important aspect of highly sensitive people. Yeah. And that desire to actually want to change, to apply oneself. But as you so summarized how difficult that can be, because you have a whole system that is against you, or not against you in the sense of personal sense, but it's just rigged towards another personality type. So you very nicely summarized, what, and I will have more questions to that, but what it took, the courage it actually takes to say, and also take that very important aspect of creativity to say, I'm going to do it my way. Yeah. So thank you for that explanation.
And I would say, Yole, it's not like the system is against you. It's maybe you perceive that the system is against you. And I think one important part of that change process is to realize that it's not personal.
Absolutely.
Nobody forced me. I mean, when I use the term, they lock me up in a hotel, I chose to be there. It was not against my will, right? So I could have left at any time, but I chose that career path initially because I thought this was going to be my normal, until I realized it wasn't going to be anymore.
Well, we all think that initially, we are taught that we need to fit in. And of course, it's the system we know. And if we want to move something and we want to build something, that's where we start. And later on, we'll get into the question of, when did it get so uncomfortable? That you needed to change. But I think Sarah wanted to ask a question.
Just a quick question for you, Guillaume, because in the telling of the awareness of it, when we recount or retell something, it sounds like the time interval is compressed. It's like, and then this happened, and then I saw this differently. What was the time span from boot camp to like going, this isn't working for Guillaume, and I think there's a different way that you could show up? So talk a little bit about that time frame and how your awareness started from a business perspective.
I love that question, Sarah, because that's exactly because I'm attached to the definition we talked about, which is narrative power. Narrative power is something that I believe builds over time. You get to so you don't some people say you craft a narrative. They refer to actually a story that you write. In my field, I say you build narrative power, which is something that you learn to do over time. The time span was about, I would say, maybe 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years. It felt like, it was very quick, but 2 to 3 years into this world to realize like, maybe this isn't so much what I want to do, right? I have to drive change in a way or another. And then that definition that Yole just read in the beginning, that's basically 30 years later.
Yeah, it's very important. Thank you for that question, Sarah, because it shows that this is not an overnight process.
No, I didn't come up with that overnight.
I would like to, for a moment, go back in time, since we're talking about, time, and ask you, and then we'll get back to guiding the guides, I promise. But what was the first time you realized that you were different from others?
Okay.
Is there a time?
Yeah, there's a time very early on in my life. And I have recollection of moments, even in kindergarten or before. It's interesting because I don't remember a lot, but I remember that for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I remember the feeling. I remember how it feels in my body, not knowing what to do with my body even. And like physically feeling like a round peg that someone wants to put in a square hole or vice versa, like physically, like not knowing where to go or how to behave or being unsure about being compliant with rules, and also forgetting about rules. So very early on in school, in fact, when I talked to my parents later, in my life, in my teenage years, or maybe even after, how it was to raise me at the time. And they said they were very desperate. They didn't know what to do either. Like they felt very much, they felt very worried, very concerned because the school wanted to, didn't want to. They were considering sending me to another special school. Don't ask me exactly the type or why, but they were considering like removing me from the normal traditional school system because I wouldn't fit in there. I was always reminded that I was absent-minded, that I didn't color within the lines, and then it was always I was a problem, very early on. So that's when I remember that. And then later along the journey, I started to meet people who recognize my difference in a positive way, and recognize my talents and encourage me to explore those talents. So that gave me hope.
So that moment of empowerment, I think we all, three of us, aware of what you describe, and probably many of the listeners as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's wonderful that you included that physicality of it, that it's actually also in your body. It's not just that, you have the feeling nobody listens to you or that you are sort of weird, but it's a deep sense of something that the body remembers. So thank you very much for that, because I think that is actually in the end one of the hardest things to integrate. It's much easier to heal in your mind and to sort of belong somewhere with your intelligence and your visions. It's much harder than to return back to a sense of peace and empowerment in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad you highlighted this, because it took me years to also acknowledge that I was feeling in my body. Yeah,
so that is a very big issue that needs to be addressed for many of highly sensitive change leaders. It's not just the mind, it's also the body.
Yeah, that's very true, Yoli, because I think that thanks to the fact that I can recognize that these days, I think, I feel like it's something that never goes away in my life. It's always there. I always have this hint of, do I belong here or do I do this? There's always that little taste that stays there. It's never gone. And I use my body to sense that. I can feel it in my posture, in my arms, in my, like, so it is a very, very, very useful tool. And for many years, I was taught not to acknowledge those body signals and really ignore them. Not recognize them. That was my narrative until I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and then I discovered, the body is this phenomenal instrument. You can do so much more with it. You can improve your life if you learn to pay attention to it and listen to it.
Use your body, as the antenna it was meant to be, rather than fight it. Exactly. So thank you for that. And Sarah, I would like to bring you in on this, because, as you know, I'm not a business person as much as you are or Guillaume is. So to me, it always seemed that the body and business don't go together very well. So, I'll hand it over to you as a question, in the boot camp kind of business.
Well, I think that's a great observation, Yuli. And I would say that maybe more today, people are considering what the link might be. But I do think that there's always been that tendency for people in business. It's like, okay, just you're imagining that, or what are you so nervous about? You got to do this anyway, instead of going, what am I learning from this, right? And Guillaume, one of the things that you mentioned that I really stood out was when you learn to pay attention and what might this be telling you. I'm curious how that helped you help the leaders that you're leading, right? That you're guiding us guides, right? So how has being more connected to that part of you kind of, I don't want to use the trendy words of up level, but really helped you see things differently or express what you're seeing? Right. You probably always saw them, but express them.
Well, Sarah, this was a major breakthrough for me because all of a sudden I could now recognize that what I was observing across, the room or the desk or the table where we started was an additional and hugely important channel of information, of feedback, right? To really connect better and to really help, my clients better. And so I recognized this, and then I got trained in this. So it was not just like, oh, I'm just interested in read a few books and that's it. No, I took years of training to connect those dots, to understand that, when we, our breath, our breathing changes, that means something. When our heart rate changes, that means something. When we have skin signals, that means something. I mean, it's like all the symptoms, right? Connect to something else. And you may not have there's no guaranteed answer. You may not have, it's not like a computer program, but it certainly gives you very, very important hints. So it was a major breakthrough, Sarah. It was one of the foundations for my methodology for a long time, for about 5 to 6 years. And then I added more things. So it was a bit less at the forefront. But in coaching, I was making those connections all the time. And that also came from my own reinvention or exploration. It was just this really big moment in my life where I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just like, if I was a tree, there was just this huge limb that all of a sudden spurred out of the trunk. Like, oh gosh, this is so fantastic. I can expand so much there. It's so beautiful. I can learn so much. I can improve, how I experience everything and help others do it. So every time it was like, I added other directions to my, to this process.
So before I hand it back to Yoli, I'll mention that the tree metaphor is great. And I don't know if anybody's geeky about trees, but the further the limbs go out, the roots match them. The drip line from the branches goes out as wide as the roots are. So while you're growing the visible, the roots are growing out to support you. And that's why I wanted to ask that question, because it sounds like that part of you that you embraced and learned more about has become foundational to the rest of the tree and the branches.
Yes, it has. And now, if you go to my website or hear me speak, or if you ask me to present my business, I will not necessarily mention it, but it's something I always pay attention to. And it's not just body language. It's also how people describe. Very often time we use word in our language that we say, this conversation had a bad taste, right? And we're referring to our senses. So this is yet another signal that makes for the work even for an even richer part of the work. I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know, Sarah, about the size of the branches and the roots, and that makes sense. And now I'm going to look more carefully at trees. Watch
trees. The ones that are the weakest are the ones whose roots don't go very far. Anyway, this is not the purpose of this podcast. But I just, I do think it's an interesting.
We're going metaphorical here, and anytime I hear a new metaphor, I jump in the metaphor because that's a huge piece of doing narrative work. So maybe it's a professional deformation.
No, it's a professional gift, actually. Mm-hmm. Let's stay in that metaphor because I really like that. Guillaume, I know you're also a musician. And you also, I think you studied design, right?
Yes.
Can you I'm curious about that, how that fits in with your tree in the branches. And, I know there was a decisive moment where you decided to use that, and it was a moment where things changed for you. Would you like to sort of talk about that for a bit?
I think what helped me, I would say, survive at the early stage of my life, as I was not really a good fit for school, was the possibility to engage in artistic activities. And my mom, who's a teacher, who was very, very focused on academics, also is a wonderful artist. She's a singer, like you, Yole, and she likes to sing opera, and she always wanted to play the piano, so she bought a piano, and we had the piano in the house. So I always had an artistic outlet. She was always encouraging, always got me. If I wanted if I was little, say, hey, I want to learn how to draw, she would take me to drawing class. So art has always been encouraged, supported, subsidized until my late teens. So that has been really, really wonderful. And then came the moments in my adult life where I'm like, okay, how do I reconcile this? How do I explain to people that, I do business consulting, but I like to play free jazz, or I'm also in this reggae and punk rock band. It's just for a lot of people, it just doesn't match, right? It doesn't compute in the general narrative that we have, So I realized that there are very, very strong parallels. Of course, creativity is not about one type of craft. Creativity is a general skill, right? And when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm an accountant," I'm not creative, like, or in fact, one of my clients last week was telling me, she's an executive at a large company. It's like, "Oh yeah, I have not been creative for a while." I'm like, are you kidding me? You constantly solve problems. You constantly think outside the box. You're not creative in the general artistic definition of it, but you're creative for everything. So for me, it was constantly, how do I reconcile this? And I let myself explore and experiment. So at age 30, I took a break from my consulting career and I went back to the conservatory. I was the oldest student in this class. Everyone was 18 to 25, and they still accepted me. And I went back to the conservatory and got a degree in jazz piano. And so that was on the side. So that I could really let that metaphorical limb grow. And once I did this, I could see yet other parallels. Like and still this, today I think of a narrative as music. Narrative is music. It's a body of work. It's not just one song. It's many songs, many stories combined together that form a system. And those stories need to be revisited. Like, they need to be reinterpreted and re-explored all the time, because every time you go through those songs, you learn new ways to bring them to life. And so that's another metaphor that has helped me immensely. And very practically, I was making good money teaching songs and teaching students, playing gigs. It was awesome. It was awesome. And then I decided, yeah, this is great, but I also realized this is not what I want the number one priority in my career to be. And really, really, business is my passion. This is really my passion. Really, entrepreneurship is really what I'm really about. You mentioned design. So the same thing happened after I had moved to the United States. I thought, so drawing, I had wonderful drawing teachers in middle school, and they saved me yet again from that desperation of not being a good fit in math and history and geography and all that. And they could see my talents. And so I started to believe a little more in these later in my life. And now we're talking almost 40. I went back to design school and learned from the basics, figure drawings and layouts and typography. And so I went to Seattle School of Visual Concepts. Here was the challenge, and where narrative power comes into play. So yet again, I was working in consulting, and all of a sudden I start using live drawing to facilitate high stakes meetings with Fortune whatever CEOs, and people see me doodling on the board, and they look at me and go, "What is he doing? Like, what? Why all those doodles?" Until they start to realize, oh, actually, those little stick figures help us see the same thing and visualize our ideas. Therefore, we have a chance to align or disagree. And all of a sudden, this meeting that used to be 3 hours and, very, very blurry and fuzzy becomes clear, efficient. So there was yet another connection between art and business in the traditional sense.
Guillaume, that's also wonderful because, it shows that you reinvented yourself a few times, and that
yes, many times
that ability to see more than just one thing in the end really helped you to integrate your talents. I would like to go back to one moment because I think that was so decisive that, I remember you told me about, and I think it's in that story, that in the narrative that you just shared with us. And that is that moment when you had to decide, in one of these meetings, I remember you said, this is not going to work. And I'm going to use that tool that you just described. I'm going to be courageous, and I cannot stay in that system. Something inside of me says that this is a point where I need to make a decision. Am I going to be authentic to myself and give it a try, or am I going to go along with the system? Could you, go into that a bit deeper?
I can tell the story.
Yes, please.
Of that meeting.
Yes,
so, because I think that's I think that's the origin. Today, I would say that's the origin story for MetaHelm. That's the moment that took me to do what I do in the form that I do it today. It was 2001, and I was working for a very, very small technology consulting firm at the time that was specialized in what's called digital catalogs. There's basically database of product information. But today, digital content in our internet world is very common. At the time, it was very avant-garde, very new, because a lot of the information that we were dealing with in businesses were paper-based, or very often time also institutionalized, institutional knowledge. But if you remember the days of ordering things on a paper catalog, you had to look through the catalog and grab a pen and fill out the form. And then somebody, then you would mail order, and somebody there would look at this visually and kind of match things and then prepare your order and so on. There's a lot of room for error. And in 2001, I am hired. So I have some knowledge on how to turn this digitally. For some reason, I was at the right place at the right time in the right company, doing the right thing. And I'm brought in by this huge company, energy company in France, to lead a project about this. And they're struggling to switch from analog to digital information. And they've invested a tremendous amount of money. I think it was 20 million euros at the time. And they are stuck, and they bring me in, and as a good consultant, I prepare an agenda, and I want to look, just traditional, because they're very traditional. They're all guys in there. There's I think one woman out of 20 or 25 in this program, in this project group. And they all come from the same engineering schools, and it is very, very formatted. And so they bring me in to say, okay, help us get unstuck. And I start, this project. I send a few emails, say we will meet at this day. I show up in this big boardroom with this team, and I kick off with my agenda, very confident. And 30 minutes into the meeting, my antennas, as we talked about before, are telling me, alert, alert. You are not looking at the only problem, it's not and actually the bigger problem is not technical, it's human. And I noticed that these people can't talk to each other. They constantly interrupt each other. They're not listening. They talk with a crazy amount of jargon that even themselves don't understand, acronyms and things. And for some reason, life at this time, don't tell me where this comes from. This maybe from my guiding angels or God or however you want to call it. But life tells me you have a choice. You are at a Y here. You can just finish the meeting and just comply with your agenda, and that's fine, and get paid for what they had ordered. Or you have a chance to change course without notice and get into a deeper layer that is probably more dangerous, more uncertain, but that will probably get to a much better outcome, much greater outcome. Well, guess which one I took.
Yes, I'm very happy you did, because I could learn from you, and I hope some of the listeners can also learn from you, is to take the road less traveled.
Exactly, the road less traveled. So what did I do? I said, okay, guys, if you don't mind, I'd like to suggest we switch gear, and I'd like to ask everyone to close their laptop. I'm going to give you a piece of paper. There was a stack of, printer paper on the side of the table. And I handed them a sheet and say, grab a pen and let's all draw the project. And they looked at me with googly eyes, like, what's going on here? We're here to make important decisions and look at these Excel sheets and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, we're turning into improvised artists. And so everybody draws the project. And of course, what do you expect out of this exercise? You get 25 different drawings. But of course, everybody has, you'll tell me, everybody has a style and choose different things. But I put those drawings on the wall, and the drawings did the rest. People stood and looked around. And I guess they were also faced with truth. They were also faced with, okay, are we going to continue to lie to ourselves, or just recognize that we're just totally not on the same page, literally? And I had no idea. What was very scary for me at the time, I was very nervous, very, very, very nervous. What was very scary is that I had no idea how this would land. I could get fired. I was in my late 20s. As very, very, to me, my career was very important. That was a big essential element of my life. There was a lot on the line for me, my reputation, everything. And somehow it worked. People and the head of the project said, well, yeah, okay, we have a problem here. We're not looking at the same thing. And I said, yeah, if you don't mind, I think I can give you all sorts of answers for the technical side. But the bigger question is, how do you operate as a team? You're not on the same page. Today, I would say you're not sharing the same narrative. At the time, I didn't have that language with me. I was not equipped, but it is exactly what I was sensing in the moment. And so I was faced with, what do I do with my narrative power? How do I want to handle that? Do I want to let it happen and defy the normal when the normal is wrong? Or do I want to ignore it? And I let it happen. And I defied the normal because I could really tell that the normal was wrong that day. And so that was the beginning of, oh, okay, if you steer in that direction, if you stay connected with energy, incredible things could happen. And what happened with that project is that we formed a group that was a lot tighter, that they agreed to slow down. I had also a lot of pushbacks. Yeah, some people in this group are like, "What are we doing? Are we doing group therapy, or are we doing group coaching, or is this a woo-woo thing?" Or I mean, all of those terms that signaled negativity, fortunately, the other half of the group, the other faction, was like, no, this is actually something we should really pay attention to. We have always felt this, but no one was able to put words on this and visuals, And that project worked. It happened to work. I stayed 6 months with them. I was supposed to stay maybe a week or two. I stayed 6 months with them. They kept extending because they really enjoyed it. And we technically made it work. And at the end of the 6 months, I got a one-on-one with the head of procurement for this multi-billion-dollar company. And he said, I have to tell you something, before we hired two big fives with big teams, and we had to fire them every time because they couldn't get it. They couldn't make it work. So, all right. I think it was not me that I wasn't the savior. I wasn't the hero. They were the hero. But I was just here to just bring a little spark. So that's the long version of my origin story, Yole. But that was a defining moment for me.
So wonderful, Guillaume, because if we go back to the Sarah's metaphor of the tree, that was the beginning of fruits.
Yes.
Fruits,
that day. Yeah. And what I also experienced that I'm trying to really have all my clients experience when they work with me is I then believed, I started to see and believe in my abilities to work differently, right? And I think that so many of us entrepreneurs, we say that we do this and we do that, but do we really believe it? Sometimes I question this. I second guess. So not second guess. I challenge people with this. And that's why I'm a very, very firm believer that until you take action, you try things like you, Yole, with this podcast. You turn this idea into action, and you're risking to put, your time on the line, your reputation on the line. And is this even going to work? Is this conversation even? Until you understand that building narrative power is also action, taking action, publishing. So for us experts, what does this mean? Publishing on a regular and frequent basis, welcoming feedback, launching new offers, reaching out to people that we think would be amazing clients, but we're in fear of letting them know that we can bring value to them, making the hard decisions and so on.
It's really, really wonderful. Thank you, Guillaume, because there's so much in there. Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up, Sarah, is there any question from your point of your perspective you would like to add?
I don't want to add. I want to ask a clarification for Guillaume on how he's advanced this, because something that you just finished saying, Guillaume, about like having people test things and get it out there and reach beyond their comfort zone. I've noticed that a lot of people are reaching, and I'll use myself as an example. I can't tell you how many people I get, hey, would you like to hop on a call? That to me is not authentic reaching. So can you talk about, and I see you very different than that. Can you just talk about how that affects how you would work with a business versus this digital? I think of it as digital distance here. I can just send this out. It means nothing. I'm not behind it. Yole could send out a bunch of stuff. She's not connected to it. So how do you help people help get us out there in a way where it's that authentic connection, not just the volume of stuff?
Yeah. So thank you so much for asking this question, Sarah, because I define this approach as authentic outreach. And I just want to pull, there is a definition for this approach, and you'll find it on my website at metahelm.com under the strategic narrative methodology. And I just want to read this definition because I think it will clarify, and then I'll give examples. I define authentic outreach as the genuine and personalized act of connecting with your current and potential clients, treating them like they are your friends, but doing it at scale. Humanizing your outreach creates an emotional connection with your audience, enabling them to relate to and support your narrative. So there are obviously very important words in them. And the first one is thinking of people as they are your friend. And I think, and you said very rightfully so, Sarah, the digital distance. Reaching out to potential clients these days has turned into this numbers game. And I can't tell you how many times a week I get those emails from solicitors and ads like, put your business on autopilot. We will reach out to hundreds of people and we'll get you 10 meetings a week. And we're going to do that for you. And it all sounds too good to be true. It all sounds like too magical. And So I gave this a try a few years ago. I'm like, oh, I'm getting those emails. These people must probably know what they're doing, and I gave this a try. I gave this a try 2 times. A company who was calling, and that led to nothing good. Well, actually, one thing great, which is for me was like, this is not a fit for me, right? These companies are in business, and if you are using them and you're happy with them, good for you. But for me, prioritizing the value of authenticity and meaningful relationship and building a business based on solid human connections, it is not a good fit. So reaching out to people as you would treat your friend. So how do you treat your friend? Sarah, how do you treat your friend? You treat your friend as respecting their time, as asking them how they're doing, being genuinely curious about what is it that they want and need in their life, first of all. And then, so focusing on them. That's how true experts, operate. My dad is a surgeon. He's 80 now. He's been in his field for over 50 years, and I never saw him hire one of those automated lead generation company, or I never saw him walk with a sandwich board, at the corner of the intersection. Like, I never saw him do that, right? But he would always care about people. And if you spend time with him in our little town in Vernon, France, you cross town with him, and people will stop and say hi, and he will ask about their family. And so this is what I mean by authentic outreach. So if you lean into this mindset, if you start by first feeling that you've got something really of value that people could really benefit from, the way you reach out to people will be transformed. And then scaling it, that's the other word, doing it more frequently, more often, is not a problem anymore, because you see this as an act of kindness, of genuine kindness. You don't see people as walking wallets. I think we talked about this, Sarah, in the past together. You don't see people as walking wallets. You see them as human beings. And I love when people contact me to tell me about their services, their offers, in a way that brings value to me. Like, they ask me the right questions, and maybe I'll become their colleague. But I can tell at first they have my best interest in mind. So I'm very much against those sales tactics and approaches that consist of, making it so impersonal that we've lost all meaning in the art of selling and doing our work. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks. Can I just take over for one? Because I think this is so wonderful, Guillaume, and it takes it back to, one of the reasons why I want to do this, saying that exactly what you just mentioned, that connection and seeing others as human beings and wanting to have that personal connection and that community is so deeply ingrained in most highly sensitive people. And it's the missing link. We are going into a direction of becoming less and less connected in many ways, and doing things in a digital way, and giving it, possibly over to robots, and, healthcare over to robots. I mean, maybe I'm the wrong generation, but to me, there seems to be something missing. So for me, really, that is such a deep part of my mission, is to say, look, if we are the ones, and we are the ones who really need that kind of connection, and you're such a wonderful example of that, because you bring it into your business and you ask your clients to really go there, really, really go there. You are, a mentor for people in that way, to actually trust that sensitivity, trust that impulse of wanting to be an empath and connected and a human being. So I really, really, really thank you for these for last comments you made. And Sarah, thank you for asking the question.
No, I just want to say thank you, Yole, because what I'm taking away from this conversation today is the theme of trusting your sensitivity. And I think it's something I should remind myself that is good, that I have experienced many times. So thanks for that.
You're most welcome. And there's just one last question because, we decided we didn't want this podcast to be too long. So let's be disciplined.
Sure.
My last question.
Good luck with me.
Well, good luck with any of us. So my last question to you is there something I didn't ask that you would like to add or to say in order to give, some inspiration to other change leaders that might not be as far down the road as you are? Is there something I didn't ask or Sarah didn't ask or you would want to add?
But maybe it's something, a clarification, because you asked me a really good question and I might have made it come across like now I've solved everything and then I'm like this, I can really understand my sensitivity and what to do with it. And I want to say that for people who are listening to us, it is a journey. It is a journey. Get on if you'd like to understand how to trust your sensitive better. Get on it as soon as possible. And connect with other folks. I mean, Yole, you're building community on this topic. You open my eyes on the fact that there's so many others. I didn't know that before. So it's a daily process. It's a daily work, right? And we're always, confronted with new experiences, new things as we continue to grow. So you didn't ask me how I deal with this on a daily basis and all the tips and tricks and little strategies and little crutches and reminders and little, we say in French, gris-gris, little thingies, knickknacks I have everywhere around me to help me with this. And that would be another podcast. But I have a plethora of little artifacts and drawings and books. And, I have my, next to me here in my office, I have my kids' toys chest to remind myself, for instance, that I was once a kid and that kid is there and it's just growing. But it's right here. And I collect all sorts of active artifacts in it. So that's one of the tactics that I have.
I love that. Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much for your openness and honesty. And, Absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah, for supporting me on my first podcast and asking brilliant questions.
Yeah. I'd like to leave people maybe with, if they want to, if anyone wants to chat with me or is interested in connecting with me, is that okay to do that, Yole?
Yeah, of course. I was going to say, when we finally wrapped up, but you can say it as well. That's fine. Is to, that I will put your information,
that sounds good.
Available for everybody, but and Sarah's as well, of course.
That sounds good. Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Go to my website, metahealth.com, and feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
If you want to continue this conversation, book a free 30-minute consultation on Yole's website at integralcoreproject.com/en/contact. And we invite you to join the support group for highly sensitive people. To join the support group, go to integralcoreproject.com/support group. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate it.